Hello, good evening, everyone. Happy May, happy Friday. Life is good. We are very excited. We just launched a brand new module in the Resolve program, which actually this is our 1-year anniversary of doing Resolve, which I'm very excited about. For those of you who have no idea what that is, Resolve is our monthly membership community where every month we take a certain biological conflict theme. So from the German New Medicine perspective, you know, each and every health issue that humans develop, even animals, that have nothing to do with, you know, an injury, poisoning, deficiency. So basically health problems that don't have to do with some kind of outside trauma, poisoning, or deficiency are related to biological conflict shocks. And so if you're brand new to German New Medicine, I suggest going to watch GNM 101 on YouTube to get started because we're going to be getting into some details here of this paradigm. And so what we do in Resolve is we take these biological conflicts and we look at them and we take them apart and we look at the elements of what it's made out of experientially for a human to have this type of experience, and then like, what do you do with it? So for example, a stink conflict. A stink conflict is either something physically, an odor, something that you want to separate from, a smell that you're missing. Another example are figurative stink conflicts. So this stinks, you're really frustrated, you don't know what to do about a situation, you're feeling very annoyed. And so it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? What do I do about it? So if I've got chronic sinus issues and I've got a chronic health problem that keeps coming back and I know I have this conflict, what do I do practically in my life, in my experience to resolve that conflict so I can get rid of these uncomfortable symptoms? And so in Resolve every month we take apart a different conflict. So we've covered a lot of different conflicts. I won't list them off. You can look at the Resolve site to see all the different ones we've covered, like self-devaluation. You know, self-devaluation, that's a big topic, and every single body part that is, you know, can experience a self-devaluation conflict has different nuances. So the shoulder is related to relationships, the neck is related to intellectual self-devaluation, moral injustice, and so it's like, oh gosh, there's so many different details and nuances. And so what we do, like I said, is we look at the conflict, we take it apart, and we offer helpful perspective shifts, deepening your understanding of the conflict itself, and then deepening your understanding of yourself, looking at yourself, figuring out how does this conflict stay active in my experience? Because I mean, most people, we just kind of live life on autopilot, automatically. We think certain thoughts. You have a trauma at some point, you're shocked, you're caught off guard, and then from that point forward, you view the world differently. You see yourself differently. You see yourself in relationship to the world very differently, and that trauma can, you know, it colors your world, and if it persists, it can cause chronic health issues. So there's just so many wonderful things about, I mean, GNM and the mindset work we do and Resolve. And so I'm going to share this if you want to say something, and then we'll get into talking about feeling stuck.
Yeah, so generally, one way that I was just, as you were describing that, I was thinking about kind of a new way of describing, if I were new to GNM, or even if I had been around for a while, understanding kind of like what's different about that particular view of health versus, say, a more traditional alternative type of health philosophy. It's that my perception and my experience, so like the way I see myself, the world, and other people, the way I experience the situations and circumstances and events that make up my life, you know, day-to-day stuff, big stuff, you know, all this just different stuff that go into making up kind of what it's like to be me at a given moment in time. My perception and my experience is kind of like my interaction with my environment. You know, if I'm seeing you in a particular way, or I'm seeing like my schedule, or I'm seeing with the actual physical room that I'm in, what am I seeing there? Am I seeing the mess, or am I seeing the nice things? Am I seeing the opportunities or the necessities? Am I seeing the things that I do like, or am I seeing the things that I don't like? That's a kind of a form of interaction. When I, as a person, am interacting with my world, and based on how I interact at that kind of perceptual level, based on what I'm seeing, what I'm not seeing, and the angle from which I'm seeing it, you know, like my child sitting on the living room floor, covered in crayon or paint or poop or who even knows what, you know, because kids get into all sorts of things, and making a big mess in the living room. Do I see a catastrophe in the living room, or do I first and foremost see a lovely child that's creating creative and probably going to cause all sorts of wonderful trouble in the world one day, like mess things up. What am I seeing? Am I seeing this creative, independent spirit? Am I seeing this healthy child? Or is the most experientially relevant aspect of what I'm looking at there, oh my God, my carpet's ruined, everything's terrible, it's a big tragedy? That's going to have a huge impact on the quality and the character of what it's like to be me. And from the GNM perspective, my body's responses, we talk about conflict shocks and also special biological programs, which are basically the stuff that's kind of encoded in the organism, the animal of us, the organismic part of us that produces these adaptations in response to how I'm perceiving and experiencing my reality. So if I'm feeling not smart enough, that's not just a sensation for the me I experience myself to be. That's not just some kind of subjective add-on that biology just put in for the hell of it. You know what I mean? It's there because it's relevant, and it's relevant because it informs. I say like the me I experience myself to be, you could call that the ego or the person, the human. But there's also that kind of ancient animal part too. There's that sort of really, really old, it's been around a lot longer than, the part of my brain that gives rise to the sensation called I. And my experiences, my emotions, my sensations, the way I see things, my capacity to experience my world, the fact that I have that capacity should indicate to me that that is in some way biologically relevant. And it doesn't mean that all you are is biology and that's all you should think about. It's not like that. It's just that there's nothing there that's there for no reason. So if I have a capacity to feel really embarrassed or humiliated or something like that, I'm using that example because, one, I have a lot of personal history of being humiliated. It was like the main negative experience of my early life. And you'll find out more about that next month, right? And because I was actually just writing for next month's module about that's one of the conflicts that we're going to talk about. If I have a capacity to feel that way, if I have a capacity to feel betrayed, if I have a capacity to feel incensed or a lot of anger or whatever, that emotion has a biologically relevant function, which is to say it's a communication, in a sense, to my body. And there's many ways in which the me I experience myself to be is almost kind of like a PR representative for the organismic part of me. There's the world out here, and then there's me, the feeling called I, and all the sensations that I have as a mother, father, brother, sister, boss, individual, male, female, whatever. And then back behind that is the organism, the ancient organism, right? And it is interacting with the environment through the part of me that I experience as myself. And so like my perception and my experience is an interaction that the me I experience myself to be, is having with my environment. In the same way, the organismic part of me, the animal part of me, right, that broader aspect of myself is interacting with my perceptions and with my experiences. And my perceptions and my experiences constitute kind of a medium through which the me I experience myself to be, interact with the physical ancient body. And when you begin to understand that, kind of the example that I like to use is like with body language. If I'm all sort of slumped over like this, or if I'm like in a meeting and I've got my arms crossed and I'm frowning, if I don't realize that the way I'm holding my facial expression and the way I'm holding my arms and all this constitutes a kind of communication, like I'm communicating to something to you as the speaker, right? Whether I intend to or not, whether I realize it or not, if I don't realize that I'm communicating to you with something that I'm doing, it doesn't change the fact that I'm communicating, but I'm not aware of it. And so I can't really modify it. And so I think one of the big things for me in GNM is when I recognize that my perception and my experience, that what it's like to be me, from one moment to the next, but also in those big kind of critical crisis kind of moments, matters more than just in terms of my subjective experience. It matters also in terms of like my body sort of listening in and saying, oh, we got intense humiliation or feeling really too slow. We literally need to speed up here. I'm feeling behind on my homework. I'm feeling behind on that big project, but my body thinks in terms of physical reality, running away from something or running to something to grab it. And when you start to understand the communicative relevance of the way you see yourself, the world, and other people, and also the way you experience those things and the emotions that you have and the emotions that you are predisposed to experience in response to certain things going on in your world, there's this kind of integration. You start to, one, prioritize those things more. And I think the other thing that's really useful is that you start thinking of what is typically referred to as disease in a different way. It's not a breakdown. It's not a punishment. It's not necessarily the body turning against you or just being dumb or stupid. It's the body responding to a communication. It's the body intentionally doing something that may not be the best thing to be doing for a long time, but it's doing it for a reason, and it's not a mistake, and it's not a malicious, and it's not an error. It's, it thinks that's what it needs to do on the basis of communication that it's receiving from the me I experience myself to be, that I didn't even know I was giving because I didn't know that my subjective experience was as relevant as it was. And so it kind of creates a matrix of integration, wouldn't you say? And kind of like a new way of making sense out of a lot of different things. Physical symptoms. I mean, if that's the most important thing in your life right now, is that you've got some process going on or some pain or some worrying, troubling symptoms, this gives you a totally new way of thinking about it that is, I think, kinder, gentler, more useful, and more empowering, less scary, more kind of like, okay, great, there's something that I can do. I think it also kind of elevates the importance of what it's like to be you and of your tendency to perceive yourself in the world, because if you've got physical stuff going on and it's because you tend to feel this way or that way, or because you're set up to experience yourself as being not good enough or too slow or whatever it is, all of a sudden now that's making you sick, you sort of say, well, that's important, let me go to work on that. Whereas before, when it was just your experience, maybe you would neglect it. Maybe it just didn't seem as important as like the physical real world, you know what I mean? And the stuff that people tend to do as a result of learning how important their perception and their experience is, tends to create an improvement in what it's like to be them. It starts off being about surviving, and getting over a physical illness, but it very quickly kind of morphs into being about thriving and about improving what it's like to be you, and about like, gosh, now that I use this knowledge to resolve this conflict and deal with this physical issue that I had going on, this disease process that I had going on, I can now use that knowledge to build a wonderful life for myself. And I mean, it's aside from, not having thyroid issues, it's nice to be able to deal with a hectic pace of life without constantly feeling like you're not doing enough, constantly feeling too slow. I mean, existential stuff. It's just nice to feel okay in this world and nice to feel that other people are okay. And so it helps you shift out of that survival mode because you kind of resolve that stuff and then segue into that thriving. And that's what I really love about kind of like the lifestyle aspect of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's really what it is. It's like just a whole new way of doing life, a whole new way of perceiving issues in your life, things that were problems, and how to turn them into projects, and how to, just shift your emotional posture to the things in your life that used to be such big, scary, huge, awful problems. And I think that's something that we happen to be good at, is helping people to make those experiential shifts, because we've made a lot of them in our own lives and we kind of figured out what works. And so another way to think about it, which I just love, is, because before I knew about GNM, I just had a general idea that stress, when the body's stressed, the body moves into fight or flight. And so, but it was kept as simple as that. Like, there are certain things your body does when you're in fight or flight. So your heart rate, your breathing rate increase, your digestion decreases because more blood is being pumped to your muscles. So there's these certain physiological changes I knew took place with fight or flight. But with GNM and the work that Dr. Hammer did of mapping out the entire body, basically it's like this expanded, detailed fight or flight. So your body's not just like flip, on off, like, okay, fight or flight or not fight or flight. It does very specific things based on your perception. I think that's what's so interesting about it, is that, it's like we never knew the body was so sensitive. Here we are with our big brains having these big emotional experiences, and we think our body just hears fight or flight or rest, but it's hearing many different nuances and subtle hues of your experience that you're just like, my body is listening to that. I had no idea that this kind of subtle feeling of embarrassment or humiliation or, whatever is communicating something very specific to my body. And my body's making a very specific adaptation based on that experience. And it's like, gosh, why are you listening to all that? It's almost the feeling that you have is like that, even just that little, I've had little conflicts and that produce some uncomfortable symptoms. And I'm just like, that produced that? How interesting. That's how closely my body is listening and experiencing, everything that I feel. So I think that's really, really cool. So let's talk about feeling stuck. So we won't go into too much detail. I've got a science tutorial, like one of the PowerPoint tutorials that I put on YouTube, coming out in the next few days so that you can see all of like the biological things that take place. And then if you want to learn more of the details about totally taking apart this conflict, that's what we did this past month in Resolve. But we just kind of want to talk about the general points so that you have an idea of what a feeling stuck conflict is. So this one's super duper interesting. And a lot of people are dealing with the symptoms of a feeling stuck conflict and they are unaware that that's what it is. So when you're feeling stuck, the biological program causes paralysis in muscles, causes decrease of neurological impulses coming from the brain to the body. And so if you're feeling stuck, you know, the whole purpose of this biological program is like the play dead reflex, essentially, of the muscles. And so you experience yourself in such a kind of scary, shocking, stuck, can't move type of situation. Your body perceives that as like the best way to survive. Our best way out of this is to pretend we're dead for a little while, not move, and wait for the danger to pass. And so this is, you know, this causes a person to say lose muscular function of their arm or their leg, you know, or multiple body parts. So depending on the particular situation, you know, the person's handedness, who the feeling stuck conflict was in relationship to. It's also called a motor or movement conflict. So like if you're unable to move, another example of this is like a baby in the womb who, let's say there's misalignment of the pelvis and the baby's stuck like this the whole time, can't turn its head. When it's born, we'll have something like torticollis where its muscles are all tight or spasmed. And so, like I said, I'll go through all of the different like phases so you can understand and figure out where you are in the biological program. But essentially, we just kind of want to talk about, you know, feeling stuck, feeling like you are backed into a corner. Another element of this is like feeling between a rock and a hard place, which it's so interesting. So like that feeling can manifest as a feeling stuck conflict causing muscle paralysis. But if you experience it in a slightly different way, it could be like a decision conflict. And a decision conflict will often cause hemorrhoids or, you know, issues with adaptation regarding that region. And so it's like, you know, depending on your unique way that you know, experience a certain situation in your life, how it hit you in that moment. And by the way, you can't really predict this. Someone asked a question, a great question in the GNM self-healing group that was like, my, you know, friend, you know, experienced this betrayal with their bookkeeper who'd been embezzling money. How is, you know, is there a way to nurture the organ in advance? Like, so that, you know, when this conflict happened, is there something you can do about it? The thing is a lot of times you don't know how it biologically hit you until you resolve it or until you start experiencing symptoms. Because, you know, on face value, one situation, like people, we are so unique, which is what makes GNM so amazing, is because it takes into account in a way that no other health model does, the unique individual perception, subjective experience of every single person. And so that's why you can't really predict these things. So something also very interesting about like a feeling stuck conflict will manifest in the symptoms of what is diagnosed as MS or multiple sclerosis. And the thing about it is people even know this is a very like bespoke, unique disease because it manifests differently for everyone. They put the same label on it, but some like people have vastly different symptoms when with the same diagnosis. And GNM is seriously the only thing that explains why one person has it manifest in one way and not the other. So I think that kind of covers at least what the essence of this conflict is. So we want to talk about, you know, what do you do if you can't decide, if you're feeling, you know, stuck in a situation? What are some helpful things that you could do to shift your perception to move forward?
It's interesting when you're talking about like the difference between I can't decide and the rock and the hard place, being kind of like distinct sensations, one being possibly motor movement, the other being kind of like hemorrhoid kind of thing. I don't know, but there's a distinction for me subjectively between I'm in a double bind, damned if I do, damned if I don't type situation. And a situation in which there's two things that I'm choosing between, and I just can't decide, not because neither of them is an attractive option, but because there's just there's just two options, and I can't choose both, and I can't decide which one I'm not going. There's a difference there, versus that kind of like, well, my hands are tied, and I'm choosing terrible option 1 and terrible option 2. I'm choosing the lesser of two evils, and they both look more evil than the other one, and so I can't. Like, that's just kind of an example, I think, of that experiential nuance, and how the body kind of tends to interpret that. Again, so what's the biological significance of this? What my body's just, you ever listen to somebody, like maybe at your work or something like that, or there's certain people that you'll ask them a question, and then maybe you think, I'm this way, maybe you might be right. You ask them a specific question, yes or no or something, and they go blah 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 blah, and you're just sitting there listening for information. You're just listening for the relevant information, and you're kind of tapping your foot, and you're sort of going, oh, gee, and you wish they would speed up, right? You're feeling that they're too slow. You wish that they would feel too slow so they get to the point. That's kind of like what the body does, I feel like, is the body sits and listens to the experience, and it's kind of like looking at a little graph like this, you know what I'm saying? The conflict shock's like when it goes up like that, and it goes, oh, that's relevant.
That's the thing.
Seems like that might be a this. Seems like we might need to do that, the other thing, And so I think that that's kind of like what the body's doing with this subjective experience. And so in terms of determining what type of conflict is going to occur, what was the experientially relevant aspect? So like you said with the bookkeeper thing, was it the personal betrayal? Did the person stab you in the back? Where I can conceive of a person being upset kind of territorially, like, you're in my zone and you're doing that? You've encroached upon my territory. I can see it possibly being indigestible more. I can't stomach that this person did this. I can't get over the fact this was done to me. I can't get over the consequences of this and the crap I'm going to have to deal with. And so really, different people will think of that. And it's kind of like when someone's describing a problem to you or something, and they just want to be heard, and they're like, the thing that really just gets to me isn't that he did this, she didn't do that. It's the fact that blah blah blah, and they give you some specific details. That tells you something about like what to them, what aspect of the situation specifically is causing it to stick in their crawl, so to speak, right? And so I think that's kind of a cool thing. So yeah, when it comes to feeling stuck, let's say that you're in a situation, and we won't get into too much of the details, but we'll apply a general principle, because this is a pretty exciting and fun thing. And this is, the more excited I get about this big picture principle, the more I look for opportunities to apply it in my life, and the more kind of freedom I experience as an individual to just not worry about what's going to happen, but just kind of deal with what comes and enjoy the process of doing the best that I can to deal with whatever it is I'm dealing with, rather than saying, God, I wish I was dealing with something else. And I found that to be an immense source of enrichment in my own life, even when the stuff that I'm dealing with isn't that fun. So when I'm feeling stuck in a situation, let's say literally, like I don't have a vehicle, I don't have a car, or my car is not reliable, or it's in the shop or whatever. Or let's say financially I'm dependent upon somebody else, like my significant other or something like that has control of the finances, and I'm in a bad situation there and I want to get out. Or maybe I'm isolated in some, there's just some situation from which I can't extricate myself because of whatever. It's very, very easy. So there's the situation outside, and then there's my internal experience of it. And it's very easy for me to say, I want to rearrange reality so I can feel different. And that's so much of our life is that. I want to rearrange reality. I want a new mate. I want a new car. I want new clothes. I want a new body. I want different stuff. I want to reconfigure outside so that inside feels better in response to it. And that's a normal and a natural thing. Sometimes, though, creating the quality of life that you deserve demands something beyond normal and natural. It's something supernatural, And so if I'm feeling stuck with regard to a situation, there's an immovable reality. The car that I want seems so far away. There's so many big chunks of money between me and having it. There's so many obstacles between me and being able to earn that money. It's just like there's a heaviness to all of this that kind of adds to that feeling stuck, an insurmountability to a lot of these situations, and a kind of uncooperative aspect to reality sometimes, where it just seems unyielding, and you try something and it doesn't work. Do you know what I mean? Or you do your best, and then it's like reality conspires to foil your efforts, and then you just kind of feel like, God, it doesn't matter what I do. I can't. It's like those dreams when you're trying to run and the ground's made out of quicksand.
That's very interesting too. It's just like that feeling of being anchored, I think, comes with all of that. You're like, I've got all of these conditions, these immovable conditions, and you feel crushed by them. You feel like, gosh, maybe I could, but I'd have to overcome this, and you carry all of those things on you. And so if those things are all on your shoulders, or you experience all of those things on your, how do you not feel stuck? Like I can't even move forward. I can barely even stand the pressure of all of this stuff on me. And so, I mean, again, experientially, the body's like, okay, it doesn't understand that all of these things are not physical, like present physical dangers. And that's really the function of the biological programs, are like for present physical dangers. And they're great in those situations because they actually do help you. But when the issues, and that's, kind of comes along with having these big brains and the cerebral cortex where we can have these complex experiences where we have, we transmute things in the world into internal sensations that aren't present physical dangers. They're kind of ideas of dangers or potential dangers or things that might happen, things that could happen, things that happened a long time ago. They're not here in the room right now, but they're in my mind. And because our minds are so amazing, they can create very vivid sensations and actual real feelings of being stuck, even though like you actually are free and able to move. And that's just what's so fascinating and so important, I feel like, for humans to understand. If you're watching this video, share it with someone, because people don't, before I knew, I was like, gosh, I just had no idea that this was such a communication. I had no idea that this feeling that, and we don't necessarily, like I made a post today. It's like, I used to not know that I could change these feelings, because the things that you're feeling, like you said, they're very natural. When you're in this situation, when all this stuff is going on in your life, it's very normal and natural to create these feelings. I used to have no idea that those feelings were alterable. I just thought it was like the facts of the matter. This is just how it is. This thing happened. These are my external circumstances. I just feel stuck. I just feel helpless, powerless. That affects the thyroid duct. I just feel, whatever this helpless way. And that's why your body steps in to help you. Because when you in a moment are feeling helpless, like you can't do it. I cannot do it in this situation. Your body says like, all right, I will do whatever I can to help us get out of this. And because it's ancient and because it's very, it's biologically based, it's going to do some things that you're like, what? No, that's not what I want you to do. But there's a language barrier there. And that's why us with the big brains, we've got to take into consideration this ancient biological programming that's just there. There's no, it's like that's what developed in response to, what it took to get us here biologically, historically. And so it's like, okay, well, I've got to take that into consideration when I'm choosing my thoughts and feelings. It's not going to take me into consideration because it's already done. It's already programmed. It's already baked. It's like, it's this that is the alterable thing in this situation.
I think kind of an interesting example just to kind of highlight the difference between like the feeling stuck. If you go back, let's say 200,000 years, and you were to look at organisms that were kind of, milling around the earth, then think about what would be a context in which I as an organism, as an animal, would feel stuck way back then. Well, the only way I move, there aren't even probably horse-drawn carriages necessarily. There's just people roaming around, walking around. And so literally, if I can't move, it's because someone's holding me down. I'm trapped somewhere. I'm cornered by an animal or something like that. That's pretty much the only time I'm going to feel stuck. I'm walking, probably, very likely. I'm kind of a hunter-gatherer. I'm moving around all these different, I don't feel stuck because I don't have a bus pass. I don't feel stuck because I don't have a car. But now look at kind of modern living. I know when I was growing up, if you didn't have a vehicle, you weren't going anywhere. Literally the closest store was probably, 15, 20, 25 miles away. You know what I'm saying? And nobody walked anywhere. There weren't sidewalks anywhere. You got in your car and you drove. And so movement, in that sense, you could be very bored. You could be very confined. That was as a child. I can imagine if you were an adult and you didn't have access to a vehicle in a kind of an automotive society, the capacity for you to feel stuck, existentially stuck, when you weren't literally physically confined, would be huge. But you've got a body that responds to those sensations and to those experiences, and it responds appropriately, but for a very old context in which if you felt stuck, you were literally stuck, probably because you were cornered, probably because you were in danger. If you can't get away, if you can't move enough to get out of a dangerous situation, your best bet for survival is not moving at all so that you aren't noticed, or if you are noticed, you're mistaken for being dead, and there's a lot of animals that won't eat you if you're already dead, and so you have to understand kind of, we're dealing with ancient stuff here, kind of like to put it in kind of modern context. I don't know why I think about this, but let's say there's a young girl and she's upset because she's interested in a boy and the boy's not interested in her. So she goes home and she's feeling sad. Her grandfather says, "What's going on?" And she says, "Well, Grandpa, I like this kid. I like this boy, but he doesn't like me and he was mean to me." And Grandpa says, "Oh, I'll take care of that," and goes and beats the hell out of the kid. That's not what she wanted, but there's a generational gap. Grandpa's old school, your body's old school, and it responds in these kind of maybe obtuse ways. They're well-meaning and they're well-intended, but you're just going to say, "Oh my God, this is not really what I wanted." Not everyone's grandpa is like that, but you get the idea. It's that, but expanded over millennia instead. So you can imagine think about the capacity for miscommunication that exists between one generation and the next. Between your parents and you, or between you and your children. I mean, I just don't get it. You know what I mean? Or like you misunderstand something in a way that like your child or your parent is just sort of like, I can't even begin to explain this to you. Just forget it, kind of thing. So imagine that though extrapolated out over many thousands of years, and it begins to make a little bit more sense how these miscommunications could occur. So if I am, let's get back to kind of the practical thing here. If I'm feeling stuck, I can't rearrange my reality, and I have this experience, very often the way for me to move forward, if I'm literally stuck, is to do work to respond resourcefully on the sensation of stuckness itself, to do something to improve, to make more resourceful my experience of reality as it exists right now. Almost nobody does this because we are so externally oriented. I don't have a car, I got to get a car. I don't have a car, I got to get a car. How am I going to get a car? I don't know how I'm going to get a car. There's no way. And it's just that kind of like endless loop of frustration, anger, despair, and all this different stuff, agitation, whatever it is. But if I actually start to think about my perception and my experience as aspects of my reality, if I start thinking of them as things that I can, emotional engines that I can do work on, you know what I mean? And I can see these situations in different ways. If I can give myself permission rather than resisting what's true and suffering over what's true, if I can say, it's never, I had a couple of principles here that kind of like help, like, so if you're in a situation where you truly feel like your hands are tied and you can't do anything about it. One is, the only reason I am where I am is because where I am is on my way to where I want to be. That's a big picture principle that if you kind of add that, it's almost like a little bit of like paprika or some kind of nice spice. If you've got an experience that's not really nice, a soup, of what it's like to be you, and it's just bland. I mean, being stuck is kind of a bland, and you add a little bit of, the only reason I'm where I am is because where I am is on the way. You add that idea into that experience. Maybe it's not your favorite dish, maybe it's not your favorite, possible experience, but you're like, well, but if this is on the way to where I want to go, feels a little bit different. You've begun at that point the process of responding resourcefully to the sensation of being stuck, which is making forward progress in your life. Do you see what I mean? Because I can improve my situation, or I can improve my experience of that situation. And very often improving my experience of a situation without that situation changing at all is a prerequisite to my changing the manner in which I interact with that situation in a way that changes the situation in a way that reflects kind of what I want. Here's another one too. My job is simply just to respond resourcefully to what's true in my inner world and my outer world. If I'm in a situation where there's nothing right now apparent that I can do, my job is not for that to be other than it is. Like, it's okay that things are not okay. It's good enough for you to look at it and say, listen, I don't know what to do here, but let me respond resourcefully to not knowing what to do. Let me not resist it. Let me not suffer over it. Let me not decide that it means that there's nothing that can be done. Let me not assume that it means that I'm not going to suddenly figure something out tomorrow. Let me just sit here and let me let myself feel okay about knowing exactly as much as I do, being able to do as much as I'm able to do, and not more. And let me take heart in that. And not like in a kind of, the word's just right away. Not like in a sentimental kind of way, or like in a like let's just let you feel better about your terrible situation, but I mean in a really meaningful way. Because when I change something about my perception, my experience of my reality, I've changed an aspect of my reality, the most important aspect, which is me, myself. And it affects the manner in which I interact with that reality in very subtle and very unpredictable ways. And so I'm doing real work when I find a way to be 10% less agitated about a given situation. It's not about coping with it, and it's not about learning to just tolerate it. It's about fundamentally doing things that kind of optimize my experience, because it causes this kind of like shunting of psychic energy, of like mental energy and emotion. It takes a ton of energy to feel stuck. It takes a ton of emotional energy to suffer emotionally because I'm resisting a thing. And very often when I stop squandering that by resisting something, because I think that's what I'm kind of obligated to do, when I realize that I have a choice to not do that, and I start persuading myself to not do that, often it's hard to describe, but it often changes me in a way that makes it possible for me to change the reality that the current me isn't able to do. And that's just kind of a really cool thing to discover.
Yeah, and so these ideas, I mean, that's what they are. So it's like sprinkle this into your experience and try life on with this idea in mind. And that is really how I've made, I think, all of the changes that I've made in my life is just by this approach. It's like, okay, what is this? What is that idea? What does using that look like in your life? And oh, here, that one didn't work, try this one. And that's really what Resolve is. It's kind of like a whole buffet of different ideas, different approaches, different, dishes, different spice, different things that you can like incorporate into the mix of your life experience. It really is a lifestyle. It's like, oh, this helped me. This was really, really useful. This idea that helped to dissolve this obstacle, helped to mentally dissolve and transform the way I was experiencing this really awful, previously awful thing in my life. And so that's why I just love all of the different, it's just a bunch of different tools, like take that. What does that look like for you to respond resourcefully to where you are? What does that idea look like in your moment to moment life experience? Because that literally works on everything. That's like, salt. It didn't, it's going to improve every experience if you take, that being the thing. Okay, how can I respond resourcefully to what is? It's almost like, just that ultimate neutralizer. It's like, how can I neutralize this situation so I can, get the lay of it and figure out how to move through this. And so that is really, that's why we love doing this, because these ideas, they in and of themselves are transformative. And when you take them and you chew on them and you put them in your body, when you put them in your life, we've seen amazing things happen. And so do you have other ones there?
It's kind of like the mental diet. You start putting this higher quality, nutrient dense idea in, introducing it into your experience, and it kind of gradually, another example I think of a lot of the times is almost like an OxyClean or something like that if you've got those tough stuck on stains, or like, what is it, CLR for like the rust, it's like stuff's still there, reality's still there, your experience is still there. We're not talking about putting your head in the sand or denial. We're not talking about being like, hi, I'm so happy, and you just shove the negative stuff down. We're talking about actually going to work on the reality of what it's like to be you, and to find, and then you'll say to me, but you don't understand, there's this and this, and I say, okay, let's work with that. Let's encompass that. Let's bring that, let's incorporate that into the project here, because it's not that your situation is not as bad as it seems or you think it is. It's that you have an incredible capacity to transform and transmute it regardless of how bad it is. And I didn't really understand that until I discovered it. And it wasn't until I started to say, gosh, the degree to which what it's like to be me is awful says nothing about the degree to which I can respond to that experience in ways that make it more pleasing to me. And that's one of my favorite things too, about like really practically coming back to the whole idea of like not knowing what to do or feeling stuck. And very often I feel stuck because I can't see a way out of a situation. Or, if I'm stuck between like making those decisions, like the rock and the hard place, or the other situation where it's like I just don't know which of these options to decide. A lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of like driving in reverse with the emergency brake pulled up. A lot of emotional drag is introduced when you're and you're not really running efficiently, and then you feel exhausted and you devalue yourself because you're saying I'm too tired to do my tasks and to even think about these things, but I must think about these things. Oh, but I can't, and all this different stuff. When you just begin to become more aware and you develop your capacity just to look at what information you have and make choices based on that information rather than worrying about the information that you don't have. When you begin to incorporate into like what we call your self-concept or your sensation of like who you are and what defines you, you're a resourceful responder. Your job's not to have more information than you do at a given moment in time. Your job's not to know how to do the stuff we're talking about here any better than you do right now. Your job is just to look at what you want, look at what you have that you want and what you have that you don't want, and look at all of it, draw a big circle around it and say, okay, given this, what do I want? And the more you do that, the more you look at realities that are sometimes scary or intimidating or unattractive or that invite you to feel badly about yourself or whatever, you look at all of that and you just say, okay, given all of this, what do I want? How you start to become that resourceful responder. You stop worrying about what you know, what you don't know, what you can figure out, what you can see your way out of and what you can't, because you say, listen, I'm not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I going to do? Well, specifically, I can't tell you because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's like improv. Life is like a jazz improvisation. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I'll tell you in general, at the pattern level, I'm going to respond resourcefully. I'm going to look at whatever stuff hits the fan tomorrow, and I'm going to say, okay, given the fact that variety of stuff just hit that particular fan, what do I want now? And you begin to feel that response rather than feeling the stuff that's going on in your life. You begin to feel the resourcefulness of your response, the unconditional resourcefulness of your response to whatever's going on. And you stop worrying about the bad feelings that might come with what happens, and you start looking forward to the wonderful feeling of responding resourcefully to what is, regardless of what is at a given moment in time. The anxiety evaporates, and you just become kind of an active and willing participant in your life, and you start making really, really smart decisions too. You start tapping into, you ever feel like you've just got the capacity to make great decisions, but you often make really dumb decisions in retrospect? You look at it and you say, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why didn't I do this thing? It's not that you don't have the resources. It's that in the moment when it would be useful for you to be able to access them, for some reason or another, usually because we're in a bad state where we're freaked out and worried about making a wrong choice, what doesn't even occur to us. And so we make a wrong choice. And then we say, oh, why did I do that again? When you're just present and you're just kind of relaxed and you recognize that your job is not to be someone other than you are. Your job is just to be who you happen to be, including who you'd rather be instead. You just be all of that, and you say, okay, given all of that, what do I want? What do I want? What do I want? You start to feel the wonderful feeling that comes with living life that way, and you start really to trust yourself, and you build. Didn't you build like a wonderful track record of really smart decisions and of like things that were just right for you? And the more you look back at that, the more and more and more you say, God, I do a pretty good job of responding resourcefully to life when I let myself relax and feel okay. And it gets easier and easier and easier, and you relax into a better and a better life. And so it's not just about resolving the conflicts. It really quickly becomes about living a life that you enjoy. And the health stuff, it's just kind of a component of that because it's just another part of your life. And it's like, I really think how you create success in one area of life at the pattern level, at the level of like principles, it's very similar. You just look at it and you learn to process it, regardless of what it is, in terms of moving towards creating, acquiring, evoking, attracting, whatever, building what it is that you want. That experience in and of itself is a wonderful one. And when you think and feel and do and decide from a wonderful quality of experience, like the one that comes with responding resourcefully, you tend to do those things in ways that are just perfectly calibrated to create the results and the outcomes that you want.
Absolutely. That sense of self-trust is so huge, and that sense of self-confidence, self-efficacy that like there's no words really to describe what that's actually like. And it's that whole anti-fragility thing where you don't feel so fragile and vulnerable to everything in the world. You feel like I am able to radically utilize anything that happens. And so you just have this sense of confidence that goes with you everywhere. And so, I mean, it really is. It's a lifestyle. It is these principles, these tools, this way of seeing yourself, this way of seeing life. And so if that sounds good to you, if you're interested in kind of like a little more of that, that's really what Resolve is all about. All of the modules, they, give very specific, helpful steps and guides. There's guided meditations, there's journals, there's notes, there's videos that really just help to unpack a conflict. And the thing is even if you have no conflicts or no health issues, if you want to like learn this way of doing life, these principles, this kind of life philosophy, I really recommend it, just because it's like the more you download this way of doing life into your experience, I mean, it's only going to improve everything. Like you said, it's how you do, how you get better with your health is the same way you get better with your relationships and your finances. And when you look at that pattern principle level, this really does, it helps with everything. So yeah, also on the note of awareness, we are going to do an awareness challenge. If you've not participated in one of those yet, I highly recommend it. We'll be doing it in the German New Medicine Self-Healing Support Group. We haven't picked the dates yet, but comment, or if you've done one before and you want to get in on this one, definitely make sure that you keep an eye out in that group, because it's going to be a really, really good one. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Please message me if you have any questions at all whatsoever. Yeah, and be on the lookout for that tutorial that's coming out and the awareness challenge, and have a good night.
Good night.